So hello everyone, we've just got 15 minutes to do this, so it's going to have to be quick. But in this story, I think we really have to think about how do we get from now to here, and again from now to here. Alright. Now the first thing that you need to do is to read and reread the introduction here. It is a very beautifully written introduction, very deep, and full of all kinds of information that will help you better understand the purpose that Chelsea Vowell had when writing it. So read and reread it, understand it well. It's very well written. So one of the first things to consider is the title. So what's the difference between Kitaskinaw and Earth? Well, these are two different words for the same thing. However, each word comes from a language, each language comes from a culture, and each culture sees the world in a different way. So in this case, we're being introduced to the Cree vision of the world and not the one that we're used to having, right? That is why there is so much Cree involved in these stories, because it's introducing the reader to a different worldview. Again, that's going to bring us from here to here and here to here, at least in the author's perspective, in her point of view. Now, again, every one of these literary devices that we see, they all go together, okay? They all touch on each other here. All right. So, effectively, the characterization leads to the plot, to the genre, the setting, the theme, and the art, and all of them go together. If you see it that way, because these are effective stories, basically the author is holding our hands one way or another and leading us to a point of view through a journey that she hopes will bring us again to reflect on our current lives and how we could make them better. So when it comes to characterization, there are basically two main characters here, Wapanatsagus and Wadi. Now basically this is the hope of a future young Aboriginal woman, healed, connected to her culture, her traditions, and Wadi, who is kind of like our modern version. So she's being depicted a little bit as a punk rocker over here with her purple hair and the badges on her jean jacket, and Wapanatsagus, who is more traditional but still has adapted to some modern things, and they create a relationship. Again, the relationship is to bring us from here to here. All right. So basically, it's a story between these two women as they try to find and help each other find some type of meaning. So for Wadi, that's reconnecting to her ancestors, her traditions, her culture, her language. And for Wapanatsagus, well, that's understanding all the trauma that she's going through. And as she's struggling to have her identity, they help each other out. It's a very beautiful relationship, okay? Versus what is and what can be. Alright, so these two characters bring us through the whole story together as they interact, help each other in one way or another, and eventually at the end we get some kind of equilibrium. When it comes to the plot, well, for this part here, it's pretty much an old school summary. Did you understand what happened in this story? So I'm going to leave that alone. The climax in this story is more difficult. In this story, I'd say, personally, I would have chosen her returning home, Wapanatsagus, returning back to her future as the climax, but you could have also looked at the climax as the series of historical periods she visited, one or the other. But when it comes to the end, all right, that's something that's very important and significant in this story. So you can just read what she said over here. And again, we have this future being depicted to us, and we have our use of Cree, Sapan, which is a word for elders. And again, bringing us into the Cree worldview that our elders are important members of society that we should value and not put in homes or forget about or treat badly, etc. That's all kind of part of the theme and the mission of the story. So in terms of the first genre, which is sci-fi, basically we're taken to this future so that we can reflect on our present. Okay, so that's something very similar to what Bradbury did. This exaggeration of an Earth that's healed, a people that's healed, Europeans gone to Mars, come back, etc., provides a context that we can really see the difference between what is right now and what can be. So the science fiction genre allows the author to use the future as a means of having us reflect on our present. Okay, it's, you know, basically a reality that we have right now that we don't really like, that's not really good, and a hope and a way to get there. In terms of graphic novel, why choose to illustrate the story? Well, there's something different to writing about the future and showing it to us. Okay, so for example here, I see the future, and here I see Wapanatsagus. So she's been illustrated for me. I don't have to imagine her, and as a European reader myself, perhaps I would go back to more traditional Walt Disney type Pocahontas versions. No, there she is right here. I can see her. She has a face. She becomes a little more real. This future now is being illustrated. It also becomes a little more real. So imagining the future is related to seeing it. Okay, and then there's something to be said for these moments, for example, these purple or pink moments when the character time travels, and this, by the way, is written in Cree, that we can kind of experience the story in a different way than if we were just to read it. The images are given to us, as opposed to Bradbury that uses words and adjectives to color our imagination. These colors are already provided to us. Okay, and we see her experiences and her traumas, etc. So this is kind of like, this is my vision, very clearly imagined, and perhaps even more real than if you were to read it. Now the setting in this case is very much related to characterization. We have a future Wapanatsagus that's healed and at peace with herself, and we have a current Wadi that is in turmoil, doesn't know who she is, reconnecting to the past, filled with all kinds of trauma and struggle. So the two settings are basically this beautiful, perfect future where the earth is healed and its people are healed and everybody's doing well, the earth is doing well, etc. And our present over here with protests, fracking, oil, environmental, social, political issues. Okay? So there's a real clash here. Just like there's a clash, in a sense, between Wadi and Wapanatsagus. Okay? There's a clash between the two of them. But they've become friends, and they have kind of helping each other, each in their own way, as I mentioned before in characterization. So again, we have this future that we see, this present that we live, and we have to ask ourselves, how do we go from here to here? Now when it comes to the theme, I think we really need to reflect on the importance of healing. How do we get to that point where young Aboriginal women are healed, and the earth is healed, our culture is healed, our countries, our earth is healed? So again, we're asking ourselves what we can do now versus, what can become later. What are we doing wrong now? What should we be doing more of? Okay, and there's like a really big clash between the now and the then. Okay, our now is very turbulent, very full of protest and anger and injustice. But this future that we're being presented in this story is very peaceful, it's very calm, it's very whole. So again, how do we get there? All right. So I think that that's a really essential theme of the story. Perhaps another theme could be for young Aboriginal women to think about how to get from here to here. But again, that journey is something all of us have to take, but in this case is for young Aboriginal women, you know, to get from this point to that point. But all of us, again, we're looking to be connected, healed, healthy, in a good environment, etc. Now for the splash page, we did this during my presentation, again the previous video, but we have a real interesting contrast, or not, between the modern world and the natural one. And in the vision of Kitaskinaw, the two of them go together. So we have our modern teepees over here, time-traveling teepees. We have these modern gadgets, etc. next to traditionalism. So the two of them can go together. There's no reason why there has to be a conflict between natural and modern. The two of them can flow together quite well. Just like we see with Wapanatsagus, reflecting this kind of modern, harmonious future, and Wadi that's living in the cities that we have today that are boxes and cardboards and poor areas and rich areas, etc. Now when it comes to the artwork, well, I want you to know what panels, gutters, and these different types of things are. I want you to spend time looking at these images. I don't just want you to kind of be like, okay, there's no text, it's not important, next. I'd like you to look at it. So here we have Wapanatsagus in the middle. This would have been my climax panel over here. If I were to choose one, it would be this one. Here she is after all of these traumas. Okay, so these little balloons over here, these little parts, are reflecting on some of the traumas she's had in the past. And it's kind of like a mix of like technology over here and traditionalism over here, the ceremonies, the culture, very much similar to tilted ground, adoption and not assimilation. The dialogue, of course, is important too. In this case, well, we have our characterization here, in which case we include a visual element of it. So here's our Wadi, again, a little bit more of a punk rocker with her jean jacket and her hair, and Wapanatsagus and her dog. We have these flashes as well that take us from the present to time traveling, and this is written in their Cree language, by the way. Okay, so you see the flashes over here too. So the author is kind of introducing us to time travel, okay, as these two characters repeatedly meet over history. So there is, in fact, a very good relationship between the two of them. You could look at Wapanatsagus over here, a little bit of an angle. As you can see, it's not quite straight. Everything is a little bit crooked. She's lying on the ground. And finally, to our issues and calls to action. So this is the one I used in my first presentation, but you could focus on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That's number 41I. On the importance of names. So names are very much related to identity. We know that Wapanatsagus doesn't have a last name. What? I don't have a last name yet? No, I'm too young for that. That's quite interesting. Now what about land development and business? So how much should our Aboriginal peoples be involved in land development and business? Okay, and then probably the one call to action that underscores every single story in this series is the so-called doctrine of discovery, or the terra nullius one, which is in a few places, but I chose this one in particular. Your job here is really to make it clear, your angle. So is it the names, is it this, is it that, or this, related to the story. Okay, so I'm about 14 minutes right now. I hope that's been clear. Yeah, I could spend a lot more time, for example, looking at each one of these and why they were chosen, as opposed to all of the other ones that were there. We could really look at that and all of it, and really tradition and modernity. There's like all kinds of issues. But anyway, I'll leave it like that and hope that all is well, and hope that everything was clear here for the presentation.